Okay, welcome everybody. Let's start the committee of the whole meeting, please, for October the 27th. We acknowledge that this meeting is being held in the traditional territory of our friends, neighbors, and Treaty 8 partners of the Fort Nelson First Nation, as well as the Prophet River First Nation. We acknowledge the treaty and the rights provided by that treaty, and we also celebrate the contributions and enduring presence of the Métis people in our region. Please be advised that tonight's meeting is available to the public to attend virtually and is being streamed and recorded. Are there any additions to the committee of the whole meeting? Seeing none, is there any public that wish to comment online? No? Everybody's okay with the agenda the way it is? Okay. So let's talk about our investment of reserves and the policy around those funds. Staff?
Yes, sir. Are you able to hear me?
We are.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. So we're at this point, we're bringing forward a draft investment policy for council's consideration. Northern Rockies has never had an investment policy. With the reserve funds that we are able to build, it's now time to have a discussion on that. What we've done with the policy is we have identified that MFA would be the investors. They would be working on our behalf. They're set up exactly for that purpose. So we borrow from them. We have invested small amounts of money when the rec center was underway, but right now, all of our funds are held in cash with one federally governed financial institution. It was shortly after I started developing the policy that we recognized that we were losing one of our two financial institutions in town that we have the ability to deal with. The credit union doesn't fall within the legislated requirements. So at this point, we're really looking to put a policy in place to have the ability to move some of our funds. We recognize that we've got an obligation to ongoing capital fund. Now I use the word capital, an ongoing bank balance that allows us to pay the bills, pay payroll, that sort of thing. What we want to be able to do, though, is we want to be able to work with MFA so that we can diversify some of the funds. At this point, our return on investment is very similar with what we're getting at the bank. We have statutory, legislated statutory requirements that MFA is fully aware of. And we would be working with them to put something in place that rolled to allow us the ability to fund projects as we need it. So liquidity is very important to us as well. So as we move forward, if this policy as it stands goes forward, we'll have the ability to work with MFA to put those things in place. It's not about moving everything we have. It's about diversifying at this point.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Just a comment. Having been the representative here on MFA now for a few years, I find it it's such a delightful lending institution that's designed for municipalities and savings institution the same way, and it maintains a AAA credit rating even as the province has lost a little bit of ground credit union wise. I mean, not credit union wise. It's actually the rating, and I think that there's a very broad range of investment opportunity within the MFA. And what's interesting to me is watching it grow every single year. Both the investment in it and the output from it are increasing, and it's a very stable system because of the fact that it's linked directly to municipalities, which are required to have balanced books. So it's different than like an open market style investment group. It actually, although it does open market investing. And you have somewhat of a option of what you invest in, what types of things that your municipality would support and things that you wouldn't if you wanted. Like there's something that was introduced about 5 years ago was called a fossil fuel investment portfolio that you, well, is that in our interests or not? Anyway, it's an example of many of the different types of investments that are potentials there. So I like the MFA because of the way it's structured for for municipal use. It really is.
Thank you, Councilor Scholes. Anybody else? I'm also, when I read it at the start of the agenda, I said, well, I hope this has something to do with the MFA, because that's where I think our money should go. And lo and behold, that's what the report suggests. I do have a few questions though, and I'm glad you talked about liquidity and whether or not we've determined which type of instruments we might use that they have. And Danny was sort of talking about that they have a variety of those. You talked about keeping cash in our own bank account and I'm sure you know how much that is that you need for regular operations and potential for a rainy day. But I also am wondering about short-term investments and then longer-term investments. I mean, we've got some investments we've put away in very specific accounts that are really there for the long term. The expectation is that we'll be replacing something. Water sewer is probably a good example of that. And so those funds are not likely to be used anytime soon. So I'm wondering if if we need to determine as part of this policy, what the percentages would look like between cash, medium term, long term, or is this just setting us up so that we can start to work with MFA and let them, because they've got tons of experience, obviously, with all the municipalities in the province. Is this just setting us up so that you can work with them to determine what that mix looks like? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. In a short answer, yes. We're a small municipality. We're not sitting there watching the market every day. We're going to MFA for their expertise and their guidance to be able to provide us with recommendations and work with us to determine exactly what those instruments might be as we go along. So first of all, we need the policy to open that discussion with MFA. But it's certainly we will be relying on them to provide us good, sound investment advice. And at that point, conversation with staff will determine if we need to manage the policy differently or if we need to have other discussions about exactly about that, how we determine the percentage of long term. But they are our experts. That really is what we're looking for, is to take on that ability to utilize their expertise.
So I agree with you there when it comes to the actual investment. When it comes to percentages of which goes where, I think that's council needs to be involved in that decision. In my view, I don't think that should be left up to staff. We should at least be involved in the percentages of with your recommendations, obviously. But I certainly would like to know and be involved in the decision that discusses the percentages of how much goes where. That's my only comment. You already talked about liquidity, and I appreciate that. Are there any other comments? Well, then I'm not sensing any negativity, so I think the direction is to proceed with that and bring it back to us for formal adoption.
Perfect. Thank you
Great.
very much.
Okay. The next order of business is the municipal facility and property lease policy. So I will turn that also over to staff.
Thank you. So this has been something that's been on our minds for quite some time, but there it was business as usual for the most part, and we felt that we had a fairly clear direction from councils past about the approach to leasing property, but it's come up in our recent conversations with a lot of our not-for-profit groups in the organizations, particularly those ones that occupy municipal space, around what we felt was the right approach in achieving a market rent for those properties. Pardon me. What we didn't consider at the time is that many of those same groups are accessing grants from the Northern Rockies to assist with their operating costs, one component of which would be rent at any value. But increasing an amount of rent to match market value would have a consequence on the future government transfers fund, and also have expensive GST, which wasn't a factor that we'd considered initially either in kind of just applying that methodology. There's also been some conversations about extending council's philosophy of not-for-profit support to this policy as well. So when we went out looking for similar policies of other communities, because we seldom do anything in complete isolation, it's not unusual for a community to offer space, municipal space or property at a reduced rate for groups who might be delivering a service that aligns with either municipal programs or council's priorities, things like that. So we looked at some of our best practices to date in how we construct our leases. And then we also looked at trying to capture that philosophy that balances both a desire to not compete with local business and realize market rent where there's commercial tenants who have an ability to pay, and also acknowledging that there are groups in the community that occupy our space that deliver services that help advance council strategic priorities. So we put something together as kind of food for thought, and would love to hear your feedback in terms of kind of where that might hit the mark or not. Put this down, people look staring. Also look through it.
Okay, are there any questions for staff? John?
I'm really pleased to see this on the table because I think we did need to have a conversation. So I can provide a unique perspective, being involved both on the council side and directly involved with the nonprofit. And I think from both viewpoints, the process so far has been a little bit confusing. And I have some concerns about some of the messaging that's already been sent to the community groups. So I just wanted to address that. And just for transparency, what's not in the report is that some of the nonprofits have already been advised that moving to market rents was a legal requirement. And, you know, I reviewed the community charter and I can't see any evidence that it's actually a legal requirement. It's legal to do, but not a legal requirement. And so one example would be one organization would have their lease increased from $30,000 to $119,820 plus utilities. So that's a pretty drastic increase. And it did cause some concern with that particular group. And then the messaging also described that the market lease model would be a wash. And there seemed to be some assurances that maybe funding would be adjusted to reflect the increases. And it might be a wash for the municipality, but it certainly isn't for the organizations that are applying for the funding. You know, as you said, they would need to show inflated costs in their budgets and request higher subsidies, and that would has the potential to create an appearance that the increased spending, well, it just wouldn't provide any additional value to the taxpayers. And of course, it would have a direct implication on the new government transfer budget. So I think ultimately any decision to increase the subsidies to offset market rent would rest with council during budget deliberations. And I really don't feel like we should be implying that those shortfalls would be automatically funded before that process takes place. So my 2 cents is that the town square and other municipal facilities it was intended to serve the community and not generate profit. And if I recall correctly, I think the building that we're in right now was purchased for $1 in the 80s. So I really feel that community leases should be structured to strengthen local services, volunteerism, and quality of life, and not necessarily, get a market rate. So that's my 2 cents.
I think that's exactly what this policy does. And I think it recognizes the subsidy that is being transferred to nonprofits for a reduction in the rent. And that hasn't been, well, not a reduction in the rent, to show that it's a nominal rent in the first place. Even though it's a nominal rent, it's still a transfer of benefit. And we should be recognized for that transfer of benefit to all of the, and I think this allows us to do that, because now we can report to the public that we are giving that benefit, so that the taxpayer are aware that these facilities are being, because there's long-term costs to owning these facilities and using them without fees. We're heating it, we're doing all of the different things, maintenance-wise to the building, not capital improvement-wise, but certainly maintenance-wise to the building to try to make sure it lasts as long as it possibly can. So, I think those costs and the benefit that we're giving to the nonprofits who use our buildings needs to be recognized. And I think this has the ability to do that. Any other comments with respect to this?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the way I read it is that, the policy is looking at keeping a nominal rent structure for the not-for-profits currently occupying municipal spaces. And from what I understand, we have, and I could be wrong on this point, but we have one not-for-profit that's occupying municipal space that is paying market rent. And so that would then be reduced for that organization. So I don't know whether I'm misinterpreting what you're just had to say, Mayor, but that was my interpretation of where we were heading, is keeping it at nominal. And it's my understanding that most of the not-for-profits that are renting for us are paying for their own utilities. Perhaps I'm wrong on that. And then I did read in here that somewhere, sorry, I didn't highlight it, but that there is the ability for council of the day to increase rents as on a cost of living kind of a basis. I don't know that I would want to see that as automatic. I think that it would be really important to allow the council of the day to make those decisions. And I also read that there would be reviewed every 5 years. And I think that that's a really great option. I know that we gave a long-standing not-for-profit like very, very nominal rent because back in the day, they were really in trouble. So, yeah, so unless I'm misunderstanding, that was my take on what this policy, and I think that is heading in the direction that I would like to see us go.
I think we're in the same place.
Okay.
I did have a question about the linkage to the government transfer policy and whether or not this applies to religious groups, where the grants to community groups, or sorry, the new government transfer policy does not apply to religious groups. What if a religious group wanted to lease, are they considered a nonprofit or are they considered commercial?
So the policy, I guess it all depends what the purpose of a not-for-profit, what their mandate is. And I wouldn't say that every not-for-profit has a religious mandate and every church may be a not-for-profit. So I think what the policy speaks to is the eligibility being a registered society. And that's not to say that there isn't a registered society with a religious mandate. I think that's up to council to better define if that's a thought. But we should also recognize that religious groups are eligible to apply for the permissive tax exemption. And we don't have a surplus of municipal space. Where this might So it's not at all related to a lease, but the policy was aiming also to speak to the disposal of property. So we're finding ourselves owning pieces of property through tax sale that we may not have an intended purpose for. So there's language in the policy that talks about leaving some flexibility for council to either put a piece of property on the open market, receive a proposal for purchase and
Oh, shit.
and
Sorry about that.
negotiate that. And, you know, it's up to the council the day that might receive that unsolicited offer, you know, what values they kind of wrap around that negotiation. Whether it's, if it's a not-for-profit coming to council to look for a piece of property to purchase, whether it's a church looking for a piece of property purchase. And then what the sale value might be appropriate based on those values. There's really not specific language. It's just opening up opportunities for kind of any method for that to transpire.
Can I just add, Julie? Is that okay? So under community leases, so not talking about purchasing, but under leases, it says community leases would offer nominal rent for qualifying not-for-profits aligned with the municipal services and council's strategic priorities. So if council's strategic priority were to increase, just pulling this from the air, religious opportunities in our community, then that might. But if it isn't, then it could either qualify an organization or disqualify an organization, depending on what strategic priorities council has decided. So
Well-
I thought that was a really good connection, and it gives room for future councils to head in a direction that they want to see it go as well. It's not just, living in the past.
I was thinking at least one church is in a leased space, right? The Anglican church is in a leased space. And if let's just say they couldn't afford that, or they wanted to find a space to do their religious worshiping in, and we had space, would they be eligible? And then, of course, you see the run-on effect of that, potentially of all the rest thinking that there might be an opportunity as well. So there's a concern I have with respect to religious organizations, specifically when they're doing their religious services, and whether they're not eligible. I mean, if they want to buy a piece of property, they're no different than anybody else. But it's that leasing of the space to hold their worship services that I'm concerned about. And then the cascading effect of giving one group an advantage over another potentially.
So, sorry,
Yeah.
follow up. So, but if it's linked to council's priorities, then currently that would disqualify any religious organization from leasing space from the municipality, because currently council's strategic priorities are not aligned with expanding religious services within Port Nelson or the NRM.
Does it specifically say that, or is it just silent? I mean, the government transfer policy is very specific, and then it says religious organizations are not eligible. It singles them out specifically.
Okay.
And then, so that's my concern, is if we're silent on it and it's not put in here, then it's open, right? It's open unless you specifically state it. So in one, we're stating that it is, in the other, we're just silent on it, and, I guess leaving it up to whoever. I think we should be a little bit more specific myself, but that's just my thought. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't see it there.
Thank you. I wasn't 100% clear on some of the comments you made. I wasn't sure which direction you were leaning as far as nominal rent for nonprofits. I know that the policy gives us the ability to, I guess, do either or, but I'm not sure what the flavor of the council's position is just from those comments. But I do have another question, and you can answer that if you like. But how does the policy affect, let's say, a house that we're renting to a medical professional? Does that have an impact on those rentals as well?
So I will answer that, because on the policy itself, it excludes other policies, including the READY policy. I'm just trying to remember where I read that.
Yeah, we did make a cross-reference. So
Yeah.
the the approach with the Ready program is that we forgive the first year's rent in acknowledgement of the service that is being provided by the physician. We reduce the rent in the second year, and in the third year, they pay market value.
Yeah, so-
or below, yeah.
Yeah,
Or
so-
sorry, they pay a reduced rent, acknowledging if they fail to provide service, they would pay market value. So we've been calculating the reduced rent at half the market value price, but it's an objective benchmark market value. So that was going to be one of my other questions, is if you could help us define nominal. Because it's one thing to say, it's a sentiment versus an amount. So you can finish your thought.
Yeah,
Marion.
so in the scope of the policy, so not the report, the actual draft policy, this policy does not apply to facility rental agreements for recreational purposes or properties identified under all other policies or programs of the NRM, example, the Northern Rockies Recruitment, Retention, Education, Training Incentive Program. So it excludes them fairly specifically. With respect to what is nominal rent? Okay, sure. You want to speak to that one?
Yeah, please. So just want to be clear, because it was I don't know if it was this council, but for sure the past council, where we had the discussion when the play school was in trouble. And so we wanted to ensure that the not-for-profits had an affordable rental options, but we didn't want to extend that to other organizations that were renting space, like for example, Northern Health. I guess they could be classified as a not-for-profit, but at the council of the day decided that they should be paying market rent, because that would be in direct competition with other companies in the town, right? Same with Service BC, right? So, yeah. So, but that's not clearly defined in here either. That's just something that I remember from a past council.
To me, they're a commercial entity, the province, when they rent.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think that's the
but
approach
maybe-
previous councils took
Yeah.
as well. There is, like, we don't want to compete. So like Service BC, if they want to rent a place for the municipality, then to be in non-competitive, I guess we're still competing, but at least it's at market value. We're not giving a lower rate than another business within the municipality. So it was a competitive market that way.
And they were long-standing renters, remember, and they didn't want to move. So that's why that was allowed to continue on.
So I guess the question is, does staff determine whether or not there needs to be a definition for a commercial, and does that include the commercial? And does that include the provincial governments, or actually any of the governments, I suppose? Go ahead, John.
So in my research, Northern Health is nonprofit. Service BC is not nonprofit. So it makes it easy for setting that rent for Service BC. But yeah, Northern Health would be up in the air. But I guess the policy gives us the option to charge whatever we want. There's no rent caps for commercial rents. So it really would be at the discretion. And maybe there's some wording we could put in there, maybe a local based in Fort Nelson, like they're based in Prince George, and they've told us our hospital is in Prince George. Well, they're not local as far as I'm concerned. So maybe there's some clarification we can do there.
And that's a really great point, Councilor Roper, and they do rent space all throughout the city of Prince George. So it would be interesting to see. I mean, they're renting commercial space, right? So they're not getting, I don't know if they're getting a discount.
I could offer, so the Ministry of Citizen Services manages all leases for public entities, including Northern Health. So we negotiate with Ministry of Citizen Services for both Service BC and for Northern Health. And they're set at market rates because Northern Health is renting secondary space in the community at a market rate. So, I mean, I don't want to not acknowledge the value. I think it's wonderful, but I would hate for also if they're paying market rent at one space and we're negotiating with the same body to then lose out on that, because we do, I think that you made the point, Mayor, that there is a cost to the long-term renewal of these buildings. And so if there's an appetite and the ability to pay a market rent, it's a disservice not to take advantage of that, because it's allowing us to start building those reserves to fund those improvements later on without that impact being to those taxpayers of the day that it needs to be renewed. And that's one of our funds that's, we're realizing is underfunded, so.
But not at the cost of the not-for-profits. We're just talking about any possible commercial leases that we have. The not-for-profit is an entity on its own when we're talking about leases.
Right.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, no, yeah. So Northern Health, they probably operate on a balanced budget as we do, but they're an arm of the provincial government. So that's just kind of food for thought.
So what's the definition of, you have same
Nominal.
nominal? Okay,
Nominal.
what's the definition of nominal?
To me, nominal can be anything from $1 to market value. And that comes into with the discussion with the non-for-profit. Like we talked about the play school already. Like, to me, like that's a nominal fee. It's below market value. And it was something negotiated with the council at the time, talking with the play school at the time on what they realistically, sustainably could afford to keep the service going forward. And that's with, however, we got to document that, I think is what we're trying to capture here with this policy is it costs us X, but we're only recouping B because we realize it's a non-for-profit. And that's where the nominal comes in. And that comes in with discussions, I think, with either staff and the board or whoever the leasee may be. Whatever can be sustainable for that service that we've acknowledged as a council as a service we want in our community.
So it may not be consistent between organizations.
The fairness comes in. Right, but the fairness I see would come in that it's an acknowledged service and we're looking for long-term sustainability. And whether it be $1 or $6 or $6,000, whatever that looks like, that can sustain the service council wants at the time in the municipal envelope, I think that's fair and we can document it as we see fit.
I'm not sure how that would go over, but go ahead, John.
I conducted a bit of my own research just into theaters, in the North Peace and beyond, and it doesn't seem like any of them are being charged market rents or anywhere close to that. So one example, Fort St. John, they rent the North Peace Cultural Center to that society for $10 a month, so $120 a year. And then our theater here, I think it's $100 for the lease and then $30,000 for utilities. And maybe what we should be doing is transferring the utilities to the theater's name and focusing on that first $100 or whatever the nominal rent is, separating the rent from the utilities, operational from, So does that make sense?
And how are the utilities determined as a percentage of the size of the building and our total cost, or that's, because it's, although they're paying for utilities, we don't know if they're paying their exact amount or not. It's just a percentage of the overall utilities in this building, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, you can probably speak to it, but technically speaking, we have a difficulty in metering each tenant separately because
right.
we don't have the infrastructure to support that. So transferring utilities to each tenant at this stage of how the building's running isn't likely to, it's going to be costly to try to
Yeah, you gotta put
achieve that model. Yeah.
meters in for everything.
So and I believe, Tony, you can correct me if I'm wrong too, but we divide out I think it's on a quarterly basis, utility costs based on the amount of space and the overall complex that's being utilized by each tenant. And then I think there's an adjustment. So if there's a rate change or suddenly a consumption spike or something, then it gets adjusted, but.
Go ahead.
So I don't know what rents all of the organizations pay, but how were they all negotiated? Like, I mean, I remember back in the day when we made some exceptions for the play school, but I mean, has that ever increased or has that stayed 8 years later the same amount? And has their financial situation changed or not for either way, right? So it's really hard to come up with a definition for nominal. And you know me, I'm black and white and working really hard to see the grays. But I don't know, this might be a bad idea, but if there was a nominal fee associated per square footage, and then if you have X amount of square footage, then you're charged this rent. That might be a way to address the fairness aspect, but I don't know, because I don't know. Anyways, a thought.
Just one comment to that, I can give you my experience. I believe the theater was charged $30,000 plus $100 per year since the early 90s. That's never gone up. So if you account inflation, that number would be at around 58,000, 59,000 today, but it hasn't gone up. So I don't believe it's been set with an increase in mind. So it would be good to look at that and find out what the real costs are. I think I sat down with Harvey one year and looked at the utility costs for the theater, and I think it was just under that cost that we were paying to the municipality. It's probably a lot higher now. That was a few years ago. But it would be good to get a good idea of what the utility costs are, and then we can challenge our tenants to reduce those costs by other means, environmental means or grants or upgrading or things like that. So
I always think about fairness and how hard it is to make it happen in the world. And the thing is, imagine the lease rate for a component of the town square versus the lease rate of a house with a known BC assessment value, or all the variables in between. First, just a comment, it'd be helpful for me in a report like this, if I would have a list of all the leased properties that we have, so that I could get a visual in my head of, okay, here, this one's being used for this, and that, because that's kind of relevant to fairness. This reminds me of, we just, what was our last meeting where we did the permissive tax exemption? And so if you go and read through those lists, and you see a whole variety of different organizations, some are doing the same thing as each other. There's churches that do the same thing as each other, and they have different BC assessment values and so on. But the thing I like about that is that there's a really clear definition. There's market value that's in the thing by definition. You get the province's assessment value of the property or whatever it is, and then the amount of tax that we're forfeiting by allowing the permissive tax. I think that's a really good thing for clarity's sake. And this is actually part of what comes with a market value approach to the lease of our own property. It's similar to that. This is just moving that, in one sense, this is moving the permissive tax thing into it's not really permissive tax, into the next step closer to the municipality, because it owns all these different little bits and pieces here. But of course, the application of them is different from one to the next, just like the application in the permissive tax exemption is different from one another. And so I don't think that the aim for fairness is really should be the main focus on this. And I appreciate you bringing up the play school and the trail that we followed in that one, because it would have disappeared completely had we not given them a basement lease form. And yet that nothing would preclude us from actually showing the value of the place and what we're doing with it. I think the transparency of how we're managing the values of the leases is more important than trying to create an equitable fairness line.
I like that approach. The either like call it a permissive lease exemption even, right? So that would settle the nominal fairness. Let's just pick a number we can agree on, be $100. Whether we permit this lease for this non-for-profit, yep, you pay $100 lease. Doesn't matter what the evaluation is, kind of like with the permissive tax, you either pay the tax or you don't. Here's our nominal fee if you qualify as a non-for-profit, $100 or $10 or whatever it may be.
Just in reply to that, though, you got to realize that the staff is sitting here, and the idea of having to reevaluate as you go, one of the reasons we develop a policy is to try to create a way of looking at it that's nice and clear, that makes it simple. Otherwise, we'll have to be going through the leases ourselves as every single one of them come up and determining a value, and we don't want that either. So
I didn't get that from what you said, though. No, what I took from it is that he just picked $100. So every lease in the town center, for example, and correct me if I'm wrong, but every lease in the town center would be $100. And then your triple net is based, so your is based on your square footage. And then that's kind of standard for everybody, right? In this building. I mean, it might be different for the space at the airport. I don't know, but for this building, it could all be good. Yeah, that's what I took from, yeah. And that's totally black and white, isn't it?
I was looking for a black and white option instead of trying to have everyone at a different percentage where it's fair, sustainable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Either you hit the criteria, here's your lease amount, or you don't. Sorry, you gotta pay market value.
And then the policy always already states it, I think, or in the notes somewhere, that every 5 years it's renewed, so that $100 would be reviewed every 5 years. And we could change that to yearly or biannually or whatever we wanted, but
Staff, any comments on the discussion?
No, great direction from my perspective.
Tony, did your hand up? There you go. You're on mute.
I apologize. In
Great.
taking a look at the term nominal as a finance person, I need a definition. And when I was trying to identify what perhaps a definition might be, is that we utilize a percentage of market rent. So we determine for every organization, it's 0.5% of market rent. So it takes into account the space, the use, and it can be fair across the board in that manner. And whatever that percentage is, it's the same as identifying $100. So that was just the finance geeks comment.
So then if you do a percentage, then how often then are you looking at that? Is it again every 5 years that you look at it, or when the lease renews, or? I mean, I understand that, you know, the common nature of how that would work, but it's still based on market value, and that has to be evaluated as often as you decide you're going to increase or decrease the rent. You know, so is it annually? Is it every 5 years? Is it just when the lease renews? What would your expectation be from that perspective?
The airport is the first kind of cluster of properties that we started with the fair market value assessments, and we did that so on a 5-year cycle. So we're coming up on a new evaluation next year. And then we had one done for Town Square in the last year, and it seems like the 5-year cycle makes sense for our community anyways.
All right, so Town Square would be evaluated every 5 years, and it would be the square footage percentage of that times whatever percentage we decided to fix as nominal.
If that's a model
That
that
makes
council
sense.
would like, or if you'd like to set rate, it's entirely up to you.
sorry. So when you're talking about the square footage, are you talking about having the actual rent connected to the square footage, or are you talking about square footage in terms of the triple net?
No, my understanding is that the Town Square is evaluated for its value. Or it's each space.
Each
Well,
space.
if each space is, then I don't have to worry about it. I thought it was the entire property that was being evaluated. And then each space would then be a percentage of that entire, but I'm being told that each space is evaluated for its market value
So is there,
individually.
oh, sorry, is there a reason why we can't take out the word nominal and put $100 to be reviewed in 5 years?
There's no reason. So it was
That's
just,
what we're trying to replace.
I think Tony's comments were just around the fairness aspect. So you have 2 tenants in Town Square, one of which gets 1,000 square feet and one gets 30,000 square feet, and they're both paying $100. But $100 may be nominal enough that doesn't make a difference, right? So I think that was Tony's suggestion around whether a formula might be a more fair approach to a nominal rent versus a set amount, but ultimately that's your call.
Yeah.
Right now, all of
I
our.
had John first and then you, Kyle.
Right
Thank you.
now, as Councillor Roper noted, the majority of our leases with not-for-profits are $100 a year. So that has been standard practice. But we don't want to assume that standard practice is the right practice either.
So I have a definition of nominal from the internet. Very small, far below the real value or cost.
Yeah.
So I think that definition covers you.
But I think we're just trying to figure out exactly what that is. I think that's what Tony asked for. I agree that that's what it is. I think Tony is asking for or something to put in to that space instead of the word nominal.
And something that recognizes the true value of the space.
Somehow,
On
yeah.
our book
Is
somehow.
somehow it's not just a-
Percentage of
something
the true value.
rather than it picked out of the air.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So
Strictly as an option.
I, for fairness wise, I do like that idea, but without knowing what the potential impact of that 0.5% or 1/4% would be, I would want to look at it before, but I do like that line of thinking.
So I don't like that line of thinking. And in terms of fairness, I think that, yes, you have like somebody that's got 1,000 square feet is paying $100 and somebody that's got 30,000 square feet is paying $100. But the person that's got, or the organization that has 30,000 square feet is paying way more in the triple net than the organization. So I think that it's equals there, like everybody pays that flat rent. And then if you have more space, your triple net goes up.
Yeah, I like the flat rent. It just simplifies it. What do we spend on these evaluations for the buildings? Is there a substantial cost with doing that?
I can't recall specifically the airport. We did get a consultant to come and do that, but that's a little bit of a different beast because we are looking for commercial rents for the majority of the property there. The municipal leases were, or the municipal space evaluation, we did on an hourly rate with a local real estate agent. So it was nominal since we're throwing that number, that word around.
I like that word.
What would you like to suggest?
Take out the word nominal and put a flat fee. For now, it's whatever at $100 and to be reviewed at council's discretion or every 5 years. So it can be reviewed if something changes in the municipality, then it can be reviewed at council's discretion, but must be reviewed every 5 years.
I don't like, I like the term, period. I don't like the idea that council has the discretion to change this one way or another in the interim of the term. I think it's just, if you're gonna put a term, you know, if we're gonna pick a number out of the air, and we're gonna put it on, let's just put it on for the term and then at the end of the term, determine if it goes up or down.
So then I wonder, should we match it to council's term? So we have 1 year left on this term, but so the next council that comes in, should they be setting that in that term? And then so for the 4-year term, the nominal rate will be $100 or whatever they decide. I don't know.
I like that idea. I don't like that should be the first priority that a new council needs to discuss. Maybe they should be a year into the term before they make those decisions, because there's some considerations, and if there are changes, they might need more time than say a set. But I like the idea of it renewing with each council. That's actually a really good idea.
Can I ask a question then, just to, may I?
Sorry,
Can
I'm just trying to calculate it. If it's every 3rd year, do you hit every council? One of the councils, and I think every 4th term, it would be in their 1st year that they had to do it. Go ahead.
So then, speak, just looking for your expertise from managing a not-for-profit, would a 3-year lease, would that be good for your business planning practices? Would that be enough time?
I think so, yeah. And traditionally, a fulsome lease would go anywhere between 3 and 5 years. So that would be well within that range of a reasonable expectation for a renewal. And I mean, this might not have anything to do with it, but the original contract for the manager was tied to the lease of the building, because if you don't have a lease, you don't have an operation to run. And so every time the lease would renew, the manager's contract would renew as well. So that's an implication as well that could have. Yeah.
So if we did 4 years, because you could set it in the policy every 4 years and it's in the second year of the council's policy, of the council's term. Right.
Even if we did it from now, we're at the third year, and then that way you have a council with 3 years on council determining for the next 4, and that takes it away from a new council. Right?
Oh. Or you put it in year 2.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, whichever.
Yeah,
Every
it's like,
4 years and you do it in year 2.
I think year 2 might be better because it gives that council the ability to realize the fruits of their labor instead of setting a council for the next or a policy for the next council. You're setting it for yours and then giving that next council that same opportunity to address it closer to the front end of the term. So
The one small hitch we might have is that we have organizations in current leases.
Well, we have to solve those first ones.
But if there's no substantive change to the approach, so yeah, I think unless the next council changes vastly and we're sitting with a tenant in a lease beyond their decision to change anything, then that's where we might have a hiccup. But for now, I think all else being equal, that would work.
Oh,
Oh, look at us go.
yeah.
Yeah.
All of this is in isolation of a discussion I'm sure we're gonna have to have with respect to recovery of costs. You know, sometime in the future, there's whether or not we're putting enough away. I think staff is working on a discussion paper, I guess, that talks about that over time. And it's not just recovery of costs for nonprofits. It's recovery of costs in general across, sorry. So yeah, recovery of costs in general across. Yeah, and this is one place where there's an opportunity for that, or not. It sounds to me like we're deciding not, but yeah, I wonder if depending what the news sounds like when it comes, from staff as to whether we might be thinking differently when we're having this conversation. But it is a good conversation. I'm glad we had it. So I think you have direction enough to pull a final draft together for when? Next council meeting?
Yeah, I think that's doable. We're projecting bringing a few things. The investment policy will be one of them too for the next meeting.
Okay. Well, good. We're adjourned. Thank you.